Okay, good afternoon or morning, depending on where you are. I am Harvey Miller, and I am the director of the Center for Urban and Regional Analysis at The Ohio State University, and want to welcome you to the third event of our series, Just Streets, Safe and Equitable Mobility in Our Communities. This is a series that's co-sponsored between Cura and the Kirwan Institute on Race and Ethnicity here at Ohio State. Today's guest, Jesus Barajas, will explore the potential consequences of this approach for mobility justice based on empirical research, examining the equity impacts of policing and infrastructure characteristics on biking and walking and motor vehicle use. I will be your host for this event. If you require closed captioning, you will find a box at the bottom of the screen called CC. Click on the box and select Show Subtitles. This will allow you to see the subtitles during the presentation. And we'll be having questions after his presentation. So please feel free to submit your questions at any time during the webinar in the Q&A box. We will ask as many of your questions as we can in the last portion of the presentation. And if we do not get to your question, we apologize in advance. If you have any questions following this event, please feel free to email us at cura, C-U-R-A, @osu.edu. This event is approved for one AICP credit. If you want to claim your CM credits, go to the My APA account of the APA website and enter the event into your online CM event log. Okay, so today is, as I said, is part of our webinar series in autumn 2023 on Just Streets, Safe and Equitable Mobility in Our Communities. And we are exploring in this webinar series how to emphasize mobility justice in our street designs. We have one more event coming up in this series that'll be on December 1st, also at noon Eastern Standard Time. And we will welcome Veronica Davis, a longtime transportation professional, advocate, and thought leader, and author of the recent book, Inclusive Transportation, a manifesto for repairing divided communities. So join us for that on December 1st. To learn more about Cura's future events or sign up for our monthly newsletter, visit Cura, C-U-R-A, .osu.edu. You can also like Cura on Facebook and follow us on whatever we're calling Twitter these days, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So today's guest, really excited about today's talk. Jesus M. Barajas is an assistant professor in the Department of Environmental Science and Policy at the University of California, Davis. His research on transportation equity addresses how systems of inequities influence travel behavior and how policymakers respond. He has led projects on topics including travel behavior, bicycle safety, the implications of policing for transportation planning, the use of equity data and metrics in decision-making, among other things. Some of his ongoing work examines barriers to access to zero-emission vehicles, equity in transportation grant programs, and the links between disability, safety, and travel behavior. He holds a PhD in city regional planning from UC Berkeley. So now I'll turn the stage over to you, Jesus. You can share your screen, and I look forward to your comments.
Thanks, Harvey. Appreciate the introduction, and good morning from the West Coast, everyone. Let me just get up for screen sharing here. Okay, so thanks for joining. I'm pleased to be part of this webinar series on Just Streets. I think this is kind of one of the core questions of my work, and really I try to do research to sort of improve justice or enact justice or give policymakers and planners the tools to enact justice. So I want to talk today, I've titled this talk, Safe for Whom? Mobility, Justice, and Biking Wear Black in the context of traffic safety and enforcement. And this is some work that came out of a collaboration with a racial justice organization in Chicago, where they were pushing the city of Chicago to sort of think more deeply about how traffic enforcement was embedded in their safety action plan, and actually to remove elements of traffic enforcement. So I'll talk a little bit about that as we go through. So I'll start with a context, setting the context for transportation safety, both for vulnerable road users, and then kind of the changing paradigm in policy. I want to talk about where I see the links between mobility justice and both the problems and solutions to safety. I'll give a little bit of a background on traffic safety and enforcement, and then I'll talk about one study that is examining these issues a little bit more closely with a focus on cycling and law enforcement, and then preview some ongoing work. I'd hope to talk about that in conjunction a little bit more with this study today, but there are some data limitation issues. And then kind of wrap up with some conclusions on the role of planning as it relates to these issues. And then, of course, talk in discussion a little bit more at the end. So I always like to start with the data. And I think the charts here kind of really starkly illustrate the safety crisis that's taking place on the roadways. So these are data from the Fatal Accident Reporting System database from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. And these show on the left the bicycle fatalities and on the right the pedestrian fatalities that have taken place since 2010. Pedestrian and cyclist fatalities have increased over the last decade, while vehicle deaths have declined, remain generally flat, depends on kind of the year that you start at. Cyclist fatalities have increased by 55% since 2010, pedestrian fatalities by 72% since 2010, and this is really an unacceptable outcome on the streets. Vehicle technology has made it safer to ride in a car, but a combination of distractions, poor street design for pedestrians and cyclists, changing vehicle types, more reckless driving post-pandemic, all of this has led to kind of the stark increase in fatalities. A report came out this week, in fact, from the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, pointing to vehicles, larger vehicles as a significant culprit here. And a quote from the report, vehicles with higher front ends and blunt profiles are 45% more likely to cause fatalities in crashes with pedestrians than smaller cars and trucks. And over the last 3 decades, the average US passenger vehicle has gotten about 4 inches wider, 10 inches longer, 8 inches taller, and 1,000 pounds heavier. We saw in the pandemic too, you see the kind of this bar jump up in 2021. So a really significant increase in this safety crisis. And this is at the same time where walking trips decreased by 31%, according to a report that came out last week from Streetlight. So all of this kind of put together shows the stark problem that we're facing on the streets. So the way that traffic safety has been approached in the past is trying to eliminate sort of the driver error. Drivers are going to do what they're going to do, and so let's design streets to make sure that what they do when they make mistakes, they're not going to cause severe consequences. And so this has meant a road system that's forgiving of the mistakes for drivers. Things like wider shoulders to create clear zones so that drivers aren't crashing into light poles, wider streets to sort of forgive the need to kind of stay in the path. And enforcement activities have also been kind of directed at ensuring preventing mistakes. And so things like seatbelt campaigns, DUI campaigns, those have been remarkably effective in eliminating deaths due to those causes, but only those causes and only focused on drivers. We're starting to see this shift in policy. The Federal Highway Administration, US DOT, has adopted a safe systems approach to safety. And so this moves our thinking about safety beyond making it safe for drivers to drive, but to design a system to account for human vulnerability for all road users. And you see this image here that comes from the National Roadway Safety Plan, that identifies kind of these pillars of safe road users, safe vehicles, safe speeds, safe roads, and post-crash care to ensure a safer overall road system. This has been adopted at the federal level. States have started to adopt this. Local levels have adopted the safe systems approach, which is also known as Vision Zero, first adopted in the US in Chicago, but now over 40 cities have Vision Zero policies. So one of the pillars that remains as part of this safe systems approach is this emphasis on enforcement. And in the National Roadway Safety Strategy, police enforcement is recognized as an effective means to improve safety, but there is kind of the next sentence talks about ensuring that police enforcement is done with equity in mind, that is safe and just. And we see that this is a tall order to achieve, and policies rooted in safety can have inequitable consequences. So I've taken just a few headlines from news articles that kind of illustrate the impact of enforcement, the connection between enforcement and inequities. And just sort of going around the headlines here, the one on the left is representing a study out of San Diego, which shows that Black people represented 16% of all jaywalking citations issued between 2015 and 2021, despite being only 6% of the city's population. In Los Angeles, a third of pedestrians issued jaywalking tickets over the last decade were Black, in a city with a 9% Black population. 90% of illegal or unsafe crossing tickets were given to Black and Hispanic people in the city of New York, despite those two groups making just 55% of the population. Similar stories in Tampa, in Orlando, and in Seattle, one of the only large cities that had a bicycle helmet regulation for adults until recently, showed that most of their tickets over the last 2 decades were given to Black cyclists at a rate nearly 4 times higher than white cyclists, and Native American cyclists were cited 2 times higher than white cyclists. Going back to the question about safety here, one reason why this is such an important topic to talk about with respect to mobility justice is the connection between unsafe streets and communities of color. And so lots of Vision Zero action plans do data analysis and overlay their high injury network or their high crash corridors on indicators of vulnerability to show how severe this problem is. So on the left is a map from Los Angeles, which shows that half of their high injury network streets are in communities that are burdened with the poorest health outcomes and economic conditions. The map in the middle shows San Francisco from their Vision Zero action plan. The stats here, 75% of severe and fatal injuries occur on just 13% of streets. 31% of city streets are in communities of concern, but half of the high injury network is in those same communities. And then the image on the right is from the city of Chicago. They don't publish a demographic overlay in their map, but for those of you who are familiar with the city, where there are high concentrations of people of color in the west and south sides of the city, you'll notice that many of the high crash corridors and the high crash areas are located in these parts of the city. Well, we can take a step back and go back to the fatality statistics here from the FARS database from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and we find evidence of disparities in race and ethnicity in terms of who is being killed relative to how much that they're traveling. So the data here come from that crash database. They come from the American Community Survey, and they come from the National Household Traffic Survey conducted in 2017. And anytime that you see a bar, a red bar on the right of a cluster, it indicates that they are overrepresented in fatalities. So for example, Black pedestrians made 19% of pedestrian fatalities, but only 12% of the population, 11% of miles walked, and 13% of trips taken. Among cyclists, 14% of bicycle fatalities, but 4% of miles cycled, 6% of trips taken. So this is nationwide around 2017. And I pulled some data for Ohio, and it's a little bit harder to get the patterns because there weren't as many, at least in cycling, because there weren't as many cyclists who reported in the National Household Travel Survey. But we do see for pedestrians some of these similar patterns as well. And then, not to put too fine a point on it, the Dangerous by Design report from Smart Growth America shows these disparities in pedestrian fatalities as well. And here I wanted to include this information on relationship to income, where at the lower income brackets, you have higher rates of pedestrian fatalities as well. So I use the data in the background to illustrate how deeply the choices that people make about travel are often predicted by race. Race is sort of implicated in understanding these patterns because of how policies have been, historic policies have been influenced by race. They've shaped the built environment in a way that just has disproportionately harmed low-income people of color. We think about issues like redlining, like racial segregation, that has sort of created the conditions that lead to these safety outcomes. There are other factors that are at play here when we're thinking about how people travel. So things like income or car access may dictate whether someone is able to drive or whether they must walk or bicycle for their trips. Things like whether people feel cycling is safe, in these attitudes and perceptions that I'll talk about in a moment too. And then the physical and built environment, of course, has an influence on whether people are walking or cycling. All of these kind of take place in the policy environment. So how we decide how we're going to plan, spend money, what sort of things that we're going to invest in are going to shape the way that people can get around. And all of this, again, is embedded in sort of the historical system of race and racism in the United States. And we can't really ignore how race is central to that distribution of interventions and the perceptions of safety. And so that's why I really like this mobility justice framework that comes out of both the academic literature and the grassroots and advocacy literature that talks about inequities in transportation or injustice in transportation as more than just distributive inequities, where there's a bike lane or where there isn't, where there's pedestrian infrastructure, where there isn't. This idea that mobility justice requires fairness and participation in procedure, and requires attention to historical harms, the value of knowledge, but also centers identity among the principles, recognizing that who you are influences how you see the world, and how the world sees you, how that can lead to harm as a result of our investments in the transportation systems. So this has come out in some of my other work too, where I've done some work to understand decisions about how immigrant groups make decisions around whether or not they're going to bicycle. And these kind of social networks are important. There are cultural taboos, as I learned from some of my interviews, that say a woman advocate for cycling was talking about her experience and challenges in getting other women immigrants to cycle because they felt like this was a taboo in their culture. We see other work, the work of Charles Brown in particular, kind of highlights some of the barriers for Black cyclists, again, sort of emphasizing this idea that identity is central to understanding how people travel or the barriers that people travel face. And in his work, cites issues of crime and personal security, inadequate infrastructure, and racial profiling as some significant barriers to cycling. So I want to come back and give just a little bit more background on kind of the connection between cycling safety and enforcement. Again, enforcement remains as one of these strategies to improve traffic safety, but when we think about intersecting that with ideas around race, we know that there are challenges that people of color face with this as a strategy. So one of the things I'm going to talk about when I get to the data part of this work is about riding a bicycle on the sidewalk. And what we know from the literature is that cyclists would rather bicycle off street or on separated infrastructure where they can. But if that isn't available, then they may ride on the sidewalk. In some municipalities, it's illegal to ride a bicycle on the sidewalk. And so this is a quote unquote illegal behavior, but really this is a rational response to feeling unsafe on the streets. And there's lots of work that show that it isn't just cyclists who break rules. 98% of respondents to a survey of people of all mode users, this was conducted in Canada. This was conducted across the globe. 98% of people admitted to breaking a rule, a traffic rule. But for cyclists, the most common reason to break rules was for reasons of personal safety. So if cyclists are riding on the sidewalk and if enforcement should be connected to issues of safety, is policing the right safety intervention? So there is some evidence that shows that sidewalk riding can be riskier than riding on the road. And it depends on the infrastructure, comparing the infrastructure availability, but anywhere from 1.8 to 16 times more dangerous to ride on the sidewalk for cyclists than it is to ride on the roadway. One of the reasons is illustrated in this image on the screen here. The vehicle crossings, driveways coming over the sidewalk, where drivers are not expecting someone coming at bicycle speed on the sidewalk. At the same time, you're mixing with pedestrians, and there's a chance that that the differential in speed may cause some harm to pedestrians. But again, bringing up this question of safety, we have lots of evidence, lots of studies that show how racially disparate traffic enforcement is. The largest study looked at 20 million traffic stops from across the United States and found pervasive racial disparities, doing a number of rigorous statistical tests here. In the study that I'm sharing here today, we see bicycle citations are issued twice as often in Black neighborhoods in the city of Chicago compared to others. And one of the problems is discretionary stops. So if someone is given a ticket for riding a bike on the sidewalk, which is arguably doesn't rise to the level of a serious safety infraction, those discretionary stops is where we see the largest racial bias. When you look only at traffic injury responses and traffic safety violations, you don't see those same disparities in policing. So let me talk a little bit more about kind of the research that I've done here again, this comes out of a partnership with a racial justice organization, Equiticity, in the city of Chicago, where from their Vision Zero plan, which first came out in 2017, and the plan remains unchanged since then, the city identified high crash corridors in neighborhoods and put an emphasis on pillars of engineering, education, and enforcement to improve safety outcomes. And their policy underlined here on the left is to police traffic laws fairly, focusing on education and dangerous driving behaviors that cause the most severe crashes. So they see police engagement as part of the changing the culture of safety. But our advocate partners in this work were really questioning whether this belonged in the Vision Zero action plan, given the legacy of racially biased policing in the city of Chicago. So we wanted to understand kind of the implications or the connections between traffic enforcement as it relates to bicycling and the availability of infrastructure on the racial geography of the city of Chicago. So we looked at what influenced the number of bicycle tickets issued per street segment in the city. We requested all of the tickets issued for bicycle offenses in the city of Chicago between 2017 and 2019. And in this study, we're focused exclusively on tickets given for riding a bicycle on the sidewalk, which is against the Chicago Municipal Code. It's a violation of the Chicago Municipal Code. And the reason is that they make up 90% of all cycling tickets in the city. And they indicate potentially a behavioral response to the lack of infrastructure on the street. If you're riding a bike on the sidewalk, it's probable that you're doing so because you don't feel like you have a safe alternative. Of these tickets, we were able to match 97% to a street segment. And we also pulled in additional data to kind of control for other characteristics. So we looked at neighborhood sociodemographics here, things like the racial composition of the neighborhood, rates of poverty. We looked at the characteristics of the street. So whether there was bicycle infrastructure on the street and what kind it was, whether it was a bicycle route, so just something painted with a sharrow, whether it was a bike lane, or whether it was separated bike infrastructure in some way. We looked at the functional class of the street, so whether it was an arterial street meant to carry high volumes of traffic, or collector streets that were somewhat lower volumes, or local streets, which are kind of your neighborhood streets. And then we also looked at cycling volume to understand exposure to traffic, so how much cycling was going on. And then we also looked at some of the neighborhood context characteristics, so how much police presence there was in the area, and safety outcomes, how many serious or fatal crashes there were in the neighborhoods. One thing to note is that the bicycle tickets give you the reason for the stop, they give you the location of the stop, but they don't give you any characteristics about the individual. So we aren't able to say anything specifically about who is being stopped, only the neighborhoods in which they're being stopped. In the city of Chicago, there's probably not as much of a difference in who is being stopped compared to the neighborhood because of the stark racial segregation of the city, which I'll illustrate in a moment. So to give you kind of the scale of the issue at play here, we see kind of from 2017, which is the start of our study, a little over 3,000 tickets issued for riding a bike on the sidewalk, down to 2019, which was just over 1,300. We focused on these years, even though we had data from before then, because in 2017, the CPD, the Chicago Police Department, came to an agreement with the American Civil Liberties Union to change their policing practices as a result of a lawsuit that the ACLU filed. And so they were required to collect and report data more transparently and change their training on the correct legal conditions for an investigatory stop, also known as stop and frisk. CPD was found to use stop and frisk at a rate much higher than any other city, and nearly 3/4 of the people stopped in Chicago were Black. So we wanted to focus on kind of this post change in policing practices. For those who are less familiar with the city of Chicago, just to give some demographic statistics, it's roughly 2.7 million people, and roughly a third Black, a third white, and a third Latino, although that's been changing as of late as the Black population has started to leave the city for closer in the suburbs. One thing, though, is that the city is starkly segregated, as I mentioned earlier. The Chicago metro region, depending on kind of how you count or how you define it, is ranked 5th in the United States in terms of racial residential segregation. What I'm pointing out here in the circles are the majority Black neighborhoods, which is important for the next slide. So coming to the data itself, what we found were that in majority Black census tracts, there was an average of 5.9 tickets issued per 1,000 people. And again, those are areas highlighted in the circles here on the left map. 1.9 per 1,000 in majority Latino census tracts, and then 0.7 in majority white census tracts. And we found that this relationship held when we controlled for infrastructure, for cycling volume, and neighborhood context. So Black neighborhoods were much more likely to receive tickets. We wanted to see how closely this was connected to safety. So the middle map here is showing bike injury crashes in Chicago. And we see that some of the highest rates of highest incidents of crashes are located outside of those circles. So there didn't seem to be a link to higher enforcement and a higher number of injury crashes. And then infrastructure, we wanted to understand the extent to which infrastructure might have been influencing these patterns. Again, looking in the circles, we see kind of visually an absence of infrastructure compared to the rest of the city. Statistically, we showed that where Black people make up the majority or plurality of the population in a tract, 11 to 12% of street lengths are arterial, so these high volume roads, compared to 9% for white, and then up to 9% of street lengths have any kind of bike infrastructure in the majority of Black tracts, compared to up to 12% for white. So differences here too. We did some statistical modeling to control for all of these characteristics that we talked for before, to understand whether the absence of infrastructure was influencing the number of tickets issued on the street. And we found that they were. So the relevant comparisons here are looking at these collector and arterial streets on the middle and right clusters. And the number of tickets issued, or the incident rate of tickets issued for streets without bike infrastructure is indicated by the leftmost purple bar in that cluster. So that 15 indicates that arterial streets without bike infrastructure were issued tickets at rates 15 times higher than local streets. And for collector streets, so a little bit lower volume, but still higher traffic, it was 7 times greater than local streets. But in each of the cases, you see when there is a bike lane or separated bike infrastructure, the incident rate of tickets decreases. So in general, when the major street types have bike infrastructure, there were lower odds of getting a ticket than without, so that incident rate was cut by about 30%. To illustrate this in a different way, what I did was I took the model and I predicted the effects of bicycle infrastructure on ticketing for different racial compositions of census tracts throughout the city of Chicago. So the way to read this is the top set of graphs is looking at the Black population, the bottom set is looking at the Latino population. On the left are arterial streets, on the right are collector streets, and the colors indicate what kind of bike facility is on the street. And you can see that in each of these cases, as the population increases, you see a higher rate. As the share of the population of that group increases, you see a higher rate, the number of tickets. But for bicycle infrastructure on those streets, you do see a decrease. So kind of looking at this globally, if separated bike infrastructure were installed on every street that had at least 3 citations over the study period, so 3 tickets, at least 1 a year given for riding a bike on the sidewalk, majority Black neighborhoods would see a reduction in citations issued from about 4,000 to 3,700, so about a decrease of 8%. So it's a small decrease relative to the effects of race on citations issued, and is subject to kind of the bounds of statistical modeling, but they do illustrate how a lack of bike facilities contributes to excess policing in neighborhoods of color. So I just want to skip right to the takeaways here, just kind of wrapping up the study. And I think this study provides some new evidence of the connection between transportation systems. You can think of it as transportation planning, transportation policy, and how it's intertwined with unjust policing practices. We see this greatest incidence of tickets issued in Black neighborhoods, but bicycle infrastructure on major streets is associated with lower ticket incidence and is disproportionately absent from Black and Latino neighborhoods. We found that safety was not linked to enforcement. In some graphs I didn't show, we showed there was actually a negative relationship between the number of crashes in a neighborhood and the number of tickets issued. And the Chicago Police Department itself talks about, or at the time talked about, their enforcement practices as linked to crime prevention strategies. So I contend in this study that these planning and investment failures compound other inequities that are present. What I was hoping to do to also share today, but was unable to, is some ongoing work where we're looking a little bit more deeply at the extent of the relationship between infrastructure, safety, and policing. In California, where I do my work, the state passed the Racial and Identity Profiling Act law, which requires police departments to report categories of identity, including race, gender, perceived sexual orientation, disability, and a few other categories of identity. And the Department of Justice then tracks sort of whether there are, or they track the rates of tickets issued to each of these categories. And so what you see in the chart here is some of these data from their database, which is publicly available, to show that even as these data are shared publicly, you still see these disparities in ticketing. The gold bar indicates the population on the left, and the share of tickets or police traffic stops on the right issued to Black folks, and the green bar indicates those same population and share of tickets for Latino folks, and you see these disparities in the aggregate statistics as well. And so in this work, we want to sort of extend what we already did for cycling and look a little bit more broadly at the effects of street infrastructure and police enforcement on safety. So some of the takeaways from this work that we highlighted in the study were to reconsider the role of enforcement and traffic safety. Again, as I mentioned earlier, the National Roadway Safety Strategy does talk about traffic enforcement as having Equity embedded the consistent, fair, just, impartial treatment of people at its foundation. You see there was a lot of movement sort of post-summer 2020 talking about removing police from traffic enforcement. Those efforts haven't really materialized at the scale that they were being talked about, but there are some kind of at the margins trying to do this removal. So again, in California, the state recently passed a law that permits traffic cameras, automated enforcement on a pilot basis, which many other cities and states already have, but as one mechanism to sort of remove the police bias from enforcement. I think this work shows the need to invest in infrastructure. So again, where we saw bike infrastructure, we saw a lower rate of ticketing. And again, our conclusion is that this has to do with the perceptions of safety in using that infrastructure. But this has to be done in close collaboration with community members to ensure that the infrastructure is what the community needs. And then I think this also really calls to that need to be attentive to the intersections of identity and mobility. Needs differ across groups. Policy effects may be different across groups, and the efforts need to account for these differences. So I'll conclude here, and I'm looking forward to talking more in our discussion. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Jesus. Very interesting presentation. Lots of good evidence and facts to share with people. We have a lot of questions in the Q&A, and I want to get to those in just a second, but let me start off with a couple questions myself. So you've identified clearly that there's more ticketing for riding on the sidewalk in Chicago where there is in Black neighborhoods where there is not bike infrastructure. And yet in Black neighborhoods, proposed bike lanes can be controversial. It's often seen as a harbinger of gentrification, for example. Now, I understand you're saying that that we should be more involved and do more of a co-planning and co-design process of these neighborhoods to make sure this is what they need. But it does seem it is what they need because there is a disproportionate number of people being ticketed, and this is also where more people are being harmed riding bicycles. So kind of unpack that a bit. Like, how do we do this in a way that is respectful to the community, but in a way that we can do this, in a way that's sensitive, but also to provide this need? Because we have a similar issue here in Columbus, where the city's very good at trying to put bike infrastructure where people are being killed, which is in the less affluent neighborhoods and neighborhoods with people of color, and yet you hear some pushback saying, well, that means our neighborhood's going to gentrify and we don't want this. So just kind of dive a little deeper into that.
Yeah. So I think there's an excellent paper by Amy Lobato out of Portland State University, who kind of talked about this issue and what happened in Portland, where Portland is one of the larger cities known most for cycling, and she documented a planning effort in one of a few remaining Black neighborhoods in the city of installing bike infrastructure. And a lot of what came out of that study was that residents felt more that it was a sign of disrespect, that only now that gentrification was sort of at the doorstep, that planners were engaging with communities. And so there is some kind of trust building that needs to happen in communities in order to kind of affect these infrastructure changes. One kind of more recent example of how this is maybe how a transportation department has kind of shifted to do this. So in the pandemic, we saw a proliferation of these kind of closed streets areas where we needed distant places to walk and bike, and so lots of cities closed streets and made to cars and made them available for walking and cycling. The city of Oakland did this. They kind of at a drop of a hat shut down a number of streets across the city. And in majority Black neighborhoods in East Oakland, the community members said, "What's going on? We don't want this. This is bad for us, because we have to drive to get to our jobs because our jobs aren't located near us. Spatial mismatch issue, all of the things that come along with kind of racial segregation." And so the city said, to their credit, went, okay, let's sit down, held community meetings to understand what the challenges are and what they need. And so they shifted the program from these kind of bike streets to more friendly kind of closed areas where there were certain spaces that were closed off to cars rather than kind of thoroughfares where people needed to drive. So that the ability or the effort to sort of reconfigure their plans when they understand what the problems are and how kind of historical actions have led to those problems I think is a way to kind of help mitigate these challenges that you raised.
Right, yeah. And in fact, our next guest, Veronica Davis, who's going to be here on December 1st, in her book, she talks about this, about the need to do engagement to understand the needs of the community and not just try to fit in solutions that seem to be good from a top-down perspective and from an outsider perspective. So yeah, join us for that. One last question before I jump into the Q&A. This is not just about biking, but just more generally. We know that policing of traffic laws is problematic for people of color, to put it mildly. We've seen a lot of evidence of the bad outcomes from that. And we know that change in street design is more powerful and self-enforcing. But at the same time, we need to develop a culture of more careful driving behavior. I mean, as you pointed out, look what's happened since the COVID pandemic. So what is there a balance here, and what would that look like?
These questions of how to change culture, I think, are really challenging and difficult. We have built our society around cars in the United States, and there's no way about that, no way around that. And so as it gets easier to drive, I think people sort of see it as their right to do what they please. I think to my mind, the real investment needs to be on infrastructure that makes it more difficult to drive. Not that you can't drive when you need to go places, but that it makes it difficult to drive fast without impunity, where we design streets that kind of accommodate more road users, where we think about ways of self-enforcing streets, enforcement through sort of removing the police, so things like automated enforcement help. And then there are just a number of other policies that would make it more expensive to drive, or where you may need to think twice about whether the destination you need to get to, you actually have to drive there. There are issues with equity when it comes to that, and sort of economic justice about that. But I think we need to kind of think about ways to decenter the car from our transportation system in order to kind of affect this culture change. And I don't think this is a quick solution, but I would start with the infrastructure.
Okay, good. Let's jump into the Q&A, and there's quite a few here. Some of them are compliments. They've learned a lot from your presentation, so you should feel good about that. Let's start off with one that came up early, and some people have echoed this question. So you just said that wider roads are safer because they increase tolerance for driver mistakes, but wider roads increase driver speeds. So how do you reconcile designing roads for driver mistakes, for driver mistake tolerance with slowing speeds?
Yeah, so I think okay, how do I want to phrase this? I think the traditional thinking from the highway engineer perspective is kind of starting with the highway as the starting point. We design highways with 14-foot lanes with lots of clear lanes on the shoulder, so that if you are traveling at high speed, you're not going to crash into anything. And that was kind of shoehorned into a lot of engineering design into cities as well, to say, okay, the paradigm of transportation planning in the 60s and 70s was to get as many cars through the city as quickly as we can. So let's create wide roads. But we see evidence, the evidence has accumulated that that is safer for drivers, but not safer for anyone else. And that kind of design standard is inappropriate in the middle of cities. And so to make streets safer for everyone, we have to shrink road widths. And there's a study that just came out this week or last week from Johns Hopkins University that kind of shows the impact of narrowing streets can have benefits on improving safety for everyone. So that's what I was trying to say. I think we thought it was safe for drivers. It is, but it's not safe for anyone else. So we need to shrink the streets to get the speeds lower to make streets safer for everyone.
Okay, great. Thanks for that clarification. I'm going to jump down and look at and ask a question here about your bicycle violation work in Chicago. Was there any particular time of day that emerged at a prime time when this occurred, and were able to determine where the individual was trying to go, like what they were doing on their bicycle?
We didn't see patterns across time, and it was challenging to sort of, where we were going was to try to tie this to infrastructure. And so we kind of looked at the scale of weeks and years rather than kind of days. But we didn't notice any patterns at time. And we also don't have any information about the behavior of the cyclist. All we know is where they were stopped, and for what reason they were stopped. So we weren't able to tie this to whether they were trying to go to work or recreation or anything like that. So that's definitely a limitation of this. Where we just have the kind of location.
Okay. And somebody was asking whether or not this work in Chicago has had an impact. Has it had an impact on the community? Are they more accepting of bike infrastructure? Has there been more calls for bike infrastructure in some of these Black neighborhoods in Chicago? Do you feel like there's some progress being made?
Chicago is a tough city to make a lot of progress in. I have to say, we did share this work with the administration at the time, the director of the Department of Transportation, and they seemed receptive to the work, but they really resisted any sort of calls to tamp back enforcement from from their safety strategy. And I think it's been disappointing on the behalf of advocates. So it made some headlines, but I don't know that it made any real change, which is kind of disappointing to those of us who do this kind of work.
Mm-hmm. Here's a question. I guess I'll just paraphrase this. Someone is saying that certainly people's driving behavior has worsened, and this is a major contributing factor. But is there any data addressing changing behaviors by pedestrians and cyclists that contribute towards this conflict? So they're taking kind of a skeptical view here and saying, well, we're hanging this all on drivers, but has there been changes in behavior recently of pedestrians and cyclists that's contributing?
I don't know of any evidence to show that, but I would sort of push back on the premise to say, I think when we think about vulnerability on the streets, we can kind of think about a pyramid where the most vulnerable people are the ones who deserve the most protections. And those are pedestrians, right? They have no equipment about them. And so we should be doing everything that we can to protect them from all the higher level sort of instigators of safety. And at the top or bottom of the pyramid, however you want to shape it, are cars. And really, we should be directing efforts to improve safety at making sure that car drivers aren't going to kill people. I don't think there's much evidence that pedestrians are crashing into other pedestrians. Certainly there are cyclists that crash into some pedestrians, but I think the scale of that is pretty low and rarely, if ever, results in a fatality. So I think putting our attention on the drivers is where it belongs, in my opinion.
No, I agree with you as a person who was hit by a cyclist when I was walking one time. So I still agree with you. Um, someone else is asking about sidewalk conditions and how this affects this disproportionate impact of on traffic safety on communities of color. Can you address that? Because it doesn't seem like sidewalk conditions, some cities like my city, Columbus, have incomplete sidewalk networks and also sidewalks in poor repair because they're the responsibility of the property owner. They're not
Yeah.
treated as transportation infrastructure. So do you have any evidence or any just kind of conjectures or hypotheses about how sidewalk conditions fit into this?
Yeah, so I tried to do a little bit of work again in the Chicago context, because Chicago does have a database of kind of repair requests. They have a program where homeowners can request money from the city to help defray the cost of sidewalk repairs, and there's some of that money is reserved for lower income communities and majority communities of color, and we didn't really find a relationship between kind of sidewalk condition and neighborhood characteristics. The sidewalk network in Chicago is fairly complete. There are locations where it's not, but I couldn't sort of tie the presence or quality of the sidewalk to any sort of questions around behavior or enforcement. I mean, sidewalk quality is a data set that is very, very difficult to obtain because almost no city keeps a full record on that. So any evidence is almost going to be anecdotal. There are some efforts to catalog them. I know where I was in Champaign, the MPO had sent out like 50 undergraduate interns to catalog the sidewalks in the two cities. So they had an accounting of that, but I haven't seen very many other data sets that do that.
Hey, maybe just time for one more question before we wrap up. Somebody's asking both of our opinions, and I'll just let you give your opinion about what about some low-hanging fruit, like, for example, planting street trees and putting like street furniture closer to the road, which tends to slow drivers down and make them more mindful. Why does that seem to be such a barrier? I mean, why is it so hard to do something as simple as that, I guess, would be the way to ask the question.
Well, this would be speculation, but I think a lot of it is about money and priorities. I mean, even though you'd want to put in a planter, you got to find the money to come from somewhere. And I think many cities are kind of struggling with providing, broader services. So that might be it. There have been good examples of doing that. So, again, the city of Oakland, which I'm familiar with, they've done things like temporary planters to create buffered bike lanes, putting planters close to the street to try to slow traffic. So I think some of those efforts are happening in some places, but the scale at which we need it is, that's a big effort.
Right. And just to generalize that, what do you see the role as, not just the transportation infrastructure, but the role of urban design surrounding the infrastructure and contributing to this and also the solutions?
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of thinking about the design of kind of the streetscape. So from the the building face all the way into the street, I think is part of how we can create safer spaces for everyone to walk and bike and drive too. So I think there's a role for that. You see, for example, in the Netherlands, where they have these streets that sort of have no markings and there's a little bit of chaos. It's the urban design that enables that sort of thing to happen. And so if we kind of think broadly beyond just the streetscape, making places where it's pleasant to walk, where there's wide sidewalks, sort of restricts the width of driving and so on. So I think, yeah, absolutely, thinking beyond the street is one solution to this.
Okay, we're just about out of time. So thank you, Jesus. Very interesting presentation. And I think based on the comments I'm seeing in the Q&A, a lot of people learned a lot from this. So thank you for your time and thank you for your continuing research on these very important topics. And to the audience again, to remind you, on December 1st, we'll welcome Veronica Davis, the author of the recent book, Inclusive Transportation, a manifesto for repairing divided communities. And she will pick up on some of the themes that Jesus raised in his presentation today. So thank you, everyone. And as always, be careful out there.
Thanks again. Bye-bye.